Hello, I'm Callie. I thought I was going on a healing trip with my sister and her friends, but they left me stranded in a tiny village in Provence. No phone, no wallet, no goodbye. At first, I thought it was just a bad joke. But then, emails were sent in my name, my job disappeared, and videos of me crying started showing up online. Was this really just a prank? Or had they planned to erase me all along? Why would your own family go this far to shut you out? They thought it would be funny. One big, harmless joke. A group prank I was too uptight to get. That's what they'd say later, if they ever bothered to say anything at all. I stood on the side of a narrow cobblestone road in Saint-Laurent-de-Lys, watching the taillights of the rented van flicker, then vanish down the hill like a bad punchline. The breeze carried lavender and dust. I stood there, blinking in disbelief, gripping the strap of my bag like it was the last anchor to the world I thought I knew. They'll be back, I told myself out loud. 5 minutes, 10. But the minutes stacked like bricks in my throat. Nothing but quiet, the clink of cutlery from an outdoor cafe, and polite but puzzled glances from locals who didn't speak English. A child tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed at me. I managed a stiff smile. My hands were already sweating. I checked my phone. Dead. Of course it was. No charger, no adapter. Monica had promised she packed the backup. "You always overthink everything," she'd said, rolling her eyes at me as she shoved clothes into her pink monogrammed suitcase. I hadn't replied. I reached into my purse. Wallet? Gone. Probably left in the van, tucked into the seat pocket with my sunglasses. I counted the cash in my side pouch, 83 euros and some change. That's all I had. And then it hit me. This wasn't a mistake. They meant to leave me. 2 nights earlier, we'd had dinner at a vineyard just outside Aix. It was supposed to be the healing moment of the trip. Monica toasted to new beginnings, while Dylan kept topping off everyone's wine. The table laughed a little too hard when I declined my 3rd glass. "You're still in divorce mode, huh?" Monica said, loud enough for the waiter to glance over. "Girl, it's a trip. You can't mess this one up, too." I remember pushing my chair back quietly, muttering something about needing air. I waited for someone, anyone, to come check on me. No one did. I should have known then. I think I did. The sun was dropping lower now. I wandered through the village, heart pounding, unsure if I was walking toward help or just trying to look less abandoned. Everything felt surreal, too picturesque to hold something so cruel. The bakeries were closing, the shops dimming. No familiar signs, no tourists. A narrow alley led me to a bakery. The windows were foggy with warmth, and the smell of butter hit me like a memory I couldn't place. Inside, an older woman in a flour-dusted apron stood behind the counter. She looked up and paused when she saw my face. Her eyes softened. No English, but kindness doesn't always need translation. She pointed to a wooden chair and the wall outlet. I smiled. A crack of hope. I plugged my phone in, but nothing happened. Wrong voltage, wrong adapter, wrong continent. I don't know what showed on my face, but the woman, Martha, I'd learn later, crossed the room and rested a hand on my shoulder. A wordless gesture. Gentle. It nearly broke me. I stared at the useless charger and felt the grief settle. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and sharp, like realizing you've been talking to an empty room. Like waking up and knowing you were never the favorite child. This wasn't a petty prank. It was something else. A purge. A deliberate forgetting. They didn't want me to come back. Not to Boston. Not to them. Not to anything that reminded them I existed outside their curated lives. I came here to heal. To reset after a divorce that unstitched a decade of my life. And now, I'd been discarded like luggage that didn't match the aesthetic. Fine. If they meant to scare me, it worked. But now I was just angry. At some point in the night, I must have fallen asleep sitting up. My neck ached, and the hard chair beneath me had left lines across my thighs. Outside the bakery window, morning had settled in, soft golden light spilling onto the cobblestones, the scent of rising bread warming the air like a blanket. Martha appeared from the back room, holding a tangled knot of cords and plugs. Her fingers fumbled through them until she pulled out something old and slightly yellowed. She held it out to me with a hopeful look and gestured toward my phone. It was a UK adapter, the kind people forget in rental flats and never return for. "Try this," she said, in heavily accented English. A rare gift, 2 words I didn't expect. I thanked her, plugged it in, and waited. The screen blinked once. Then again. A low buzz. Battery? 1%. Enough to flicker to life. Not enough for anything else. I tapped the power button, praying. Before I could open a single app, the screen lit up with an incoming call. Reed. I hadn't seen that name in months. The name alone made my chest go tight. The bakery around me blurred for a second, like someone had yanked me back across the ocean. My thumb hovered over decline, but something made me answer. "Hello?" His voice came through clear, smooth, like it always had, like nothing had happened. "Callie," he said. "Finally." I didn't speak. He filled the silence fast. "Your mom's worried. I mean, really worried. Monica called me in tears." Liar. Monica hadn't shed a tear in a decade unless it was for a photo. "You just disappeared," he continued, as if I hadn't been dumped in another country like forgotten luggage. "You always do this. Shut down. Vanish when it gets hard." "I didn't vanish," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I was left." He sighed, like I was a child who still didn't get the lesson. "Look, maybe the timing was off, but everyone's under stress. You have to stop taking everything so personally." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, heart thudding. I knew this dance. Reed never yelled. He was never the villain. Just endlessly, reasonable, calm, always angling the mirror to show your own reflection and ask what's wrong with you. "I talked to your mom again," he said casually. "She's devastated. Your dad doesn't even know where you are. Do you realize how selfish this looks?" "I didn't ask for any of this." "No," he said, a beat too quick, "but you sure know how to make it about you." There it was, the real tone, polite on the surface, poison underneath. "You need to come home, Callie. You're not going to fix anything out there. You can't heal surrounded by strangers and whatever it is you think you're doing." I stayed silent. Every word he said pressed on old bruises. Then came the line that snapped everything. "I know Provence isn't ideal, but maybe you'll come back a little clearer. A little cleaner." Cleaner? I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was. Not even the village name. I hadn't tagged a location. Hadn't posted anything. But Reed knew. He didn't say it like a guess. He said it like he'd seen it. That call wasn't concern. It was surveillance in disguise. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just said, "Goodbye, Reed," and hung up. I sat there for a long time, breathing shallow, letting it wash through me. Then I stood and walked to the bakery's doorway. Outside, the sun lit up a distant row of olive trees that stretched like arms into the hills. Quiet, steady, rooted. "I'm not your mess to clean up," I whispered. "Not anymore." I didn't sleep much that night. The phone call with Reed had frayed every nerve, and even the comforting scent of yeast and sugar drifting in from the bakery couldn't calm the static inside my chest. By morning, I needed to move. Sitting still made me feel hunted. The village market stretched along the main square, woven with bright umbrellas and wooden crates stacked with tomatoes, peaches, and bottles of olive oil. I didn't have a plan, only the urge to look normal, blend in, browse, pretend I belonged. I picked up a small basket and wandered between the stalls, grabbing a loaf of crusty bread, a handful of apricots, and a bottle of water. I was reaching for a bunch of thyme when someone bumped into me hard enough to jostle my bag. "Oh, I'm so sorry," a woman said, her voice too cheerful. She had shoulder-length hair the color of honey and sunglasses perched on her head. Though the day was cloudy, she smiled like we were old friends. "Callie, right?" I froze. My name hadn't passed a stranger's lips since I landed in France. I didn't know this woman. I searched her face for a flicker of recognition, but there was none. Only that smooth, curated smile. "Didn't we meet at that vineyard tour in Avignon?" she offered, tilting her head. "Or maybe you're friends with Monica?" My stomach clenched. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed that something was off. Before I could ask her anything, where she was from, who she knew, she smiled wider and disappeared into the crowd with a breezy, "Take care!" I stood there for a full minute, clutching my basket like a shield. Then I walked away, slowly, then faster. How did she know my name? The question rang louder than any bell tower. Back at the bakery, I ducked into the rear room where Martha stored flour and cleaned vegetables. She looked up from peeling carrots and gave me that same steady glance I was beginning to rely on. I offered a nod, silent reassurance that I was okay. Sort of. Once I connected to the bakery's patchy Wi-Fi, my phone pinged with delayed notifications. I opened my email. Among the spam and subscription newsletters was a single message from my mother. Subject line, from Homebody. "Sweetheart, Monica told us you're not well. If you need help, please don't shut us out again. We're all worried. This behavior isn't like you." My hands tightened around the phone. So that was the angle now. I wasn't just lost. I was unstable. The same storyline they had fed our family years ago when I cried through my first miscarriage, when I stopped smiling after the divorce. Monica had always known how to play the part, the capable one, the fixer. She'd walk into a room with her shiny hair and flawless posture and say things like, "She just needs space," or "It's a lot for her right now." But what she really meant was, "Don't believe her. Believe me." I remembered a Christmas years ago, sitting at the dinner table, trying to explain to my parents that Reed had cut me out of our joint accounts. Monica had laughed. "That's not abuse, Callie. It's marriage. Grow up." And they'd nodded. Because Monica always sounded more reasonable. My eyes burned as I walked behind the bakery, past a row of potted herbs, into the clearing beyond. I sank to the ground. This wasn't just about being stranded. It was about being rewritten. Again. Recast as the emotional one. The problem. The version of me that Monica could manage, contain, dismiss. I tilted my head toward the sky, blinking hard. "They've got the script," I muttered. "They just needed me to vanish so they could narrate it." I stayed there for a while, letting the quiet press into me, letting the rage cool and crystallize. Then I wiped my face with my sleeve, stood up, and walked back through the alleyway. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't broken. And if they wanted a version of me, they could explain away. They were about to meet the one they couldn't. The words came easily once I stopped trying to soften them. It was past midnight. The bakery had gone silent. Martha had long since gone upstairs, and I sat in the back office with the lights dimmed and my laptop screen the only glow in the room. The email cursor blinked like a dare. Subject line, "You don't get to define me, Monica. You left me on a curb in a country I barely speak the language of. No warning, no explanation, just laughter fading behind a slammed van door." I paused, then continued. "I spent the first hour thinking it was a joke, the second hoping it was a test. By hour 3, I understood it was neither." Each sentence dropped like a stone. There was no venom, just the weight of truth. I'm not writing this for an apology. I know better. I'm writing because you've spent years rewriting my life in your words. Not this time. I ended with, "You don't get to define me anymore." And then, I hit send. The email didn't make me feel lighter. It didn't bring closure or triumph. It just made something still. Like I had finally shut a door and locked it from the inside. I slept for 3 hours. When I woke, it was to the scent of cinnamon and apricots and the faint vibration of my phone. New message, Monica. "OMG, you're okay. So relieved. I told Mom you probably just needed time to breathe." Everyone kinda panicked, lol. Hopefully we'll laugh about this someday. Emoji, heart, sparkle, butterfly. I stared at the screen like it had teeth. There was no apology, no mention of what happened, just bubble-wrapped condescension and a thin layer of performance. She wasn't acknowledging the harm. She was preparing the story for everyone else. The good sister who held it all together. The broken one who ran off. That same tired script. I didn't respond. Instead, I took out the notebook Martha had given me when I first arrived. I hadn't written in it until now. I turned to a blank page and in big letters I wrote, "Who I am." Then underneath, not Monica's version, not Reed's ex-wife, not someone who needs managing, not broken, not missing, not yours. I filled 3 more pages. I didn't stop to edit or second guess. I just let it pour out. Everything I'd traded away for peace, for approval, for silence. The sun was climbing when I finally came out front. Martha stood by the counter kneading dough, humming something low. She glanced up as I passed and said, "You have stronger eyes today." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She smiled gently, pointed to her face. "Before, your eyes were heavy. Today, sharp." I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. "Thanks. I think I needed someone to say that." Later that afternoon, I wandered into town again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My steps felt different, grounded. I passed the bookstore, the wine shop. I looked at the world with a sense of space, of choice. Monica's email hadn't rattled me. It had confirmed everything I already knew. But by sunset, I would learn Monica and Reed had already taken something else from me. It started with a scroll. I was sitting in the back courtyard behind the bakery, feet up on a cracked bench, soft golden light filtering through grapevines above. I hadn't planned to check my old email. That account had become a graveyard. Expired coupons, forgotten subscriptions, the occasional spam from a wellness blog I didn't remember subscribing to. But something made me open it. The inbox loaded slow, and then there it was. 5 messages stacked one after the other, all from Dana, my former design mentor. My lifeline when I was still figuring out where creativity ended and survival began. The first was dated 2 months ago. "Callie, hope you're well. I've got a remote project I think you'd be perfect for. Eco-architecture, flexible hours, full autonomy. Let me know if you're interested." My throat tightened. The next email was a gentle follow-up. Then another. The 4th was shorter. I didn't hear back, so assuming it's a pass. And then came the 5th, forwarded. Below it, a line chilled my blood. "Thanks for thinking of me, but I've moved on from design. Best of luck." It was from my account. I never sent it. My hands trembled as I reread the message. It was polite, neutral, just enough distance to make it seem final. But I knew that tone. It wasn't mine. It was Reed's. Years ago, he'd helped me simplify by merging our logins, linking accounts, taking little things off my plate. He said I needed to focus on healing. He said it with that voice he used when he didn't want me to argue. I'd nodded. Back then, nodding was easier. Now I saw it for what it was. Control. They hadn't just stranded me in Provence. They'd sabotaged the one thing that could have brought me back to life, my work. Martha found me moments later, hunched over the table, breath shallow. She sat without asking, and waited while I typed frantically into Google Translate. I turned the screen to her. "This," I said. "This is what they took." She read the translation, blinked slowly, then said in her soft accent, "They want you small." I didn't answer. She reached over, tapped the center of my chest with 2 fingers. "You are not small." Something cracked open in me, not with a scream, not with a sob. It was a quiet, burning clarity. I went inside and pulled out my notebook. I drew a line down the middle of the page. Left side, what they've taken, my wallet, my location, my voice, my career. Right side, what I still have, my mind, my hands, my memory, my truth. At the bottom, I wrote, what they never expected. I kept the receipts. By nightfall, I had created a new email account. Something clean, something untainted. I drafted a message to Dana. Subject: that wasn't me. Body: hi Dana, I just saw your messages and wanted you to know. I never replied. Someone else did. I'm still here, still designing, still interested. Attaching a fresh portfolio, some old pieces, some new sketches. Nothing polished but honest. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked send. It wasn't about getting the job. It was about reclaiming the door they tried to seal shut behind me. It was late, the kind of late where even the crickets had gone quiet. The air outside was heavy with the scent of lavender and cooling stone. I'd just finished dinner with Martha. Bread, goat cheese, tomatoes still warm from the sun. My hands still smelled of basil. The message was from Harper. Harper, a friend from back home. More of a former colleague now. We hadn't spoken since the divorce. Hey, is this really you? There was a link. My stomach dropped. I tapped it. The screen loaded. TikTok. The username, @DylanDoesTruth. The video opened with shaky footage. Me, sitting on the curb outside the cafe where they'd left me. My face streaked with sweat and mascara. Eyes darting. Voice too soft to hear. Then a quick cut to me, walking aimlessly through the village. Shoulders slumped, lips moving like I was talking to myself. Overlay text. Sometimes you just can't save people from themselves. Cut to Dylan's voice, spliced from somewhere else. We tried. We really did. But she wasn't well. You can't force someone to want help. Background music. Soft, haunting piano. The comment section was worse. Yikes. Poor Monica, dealing with this kind of drama. This girl needs serious help. You can see it in her eyes. She's gone. I dropped the phone. It clattered against the stone floor, the video still playing. I wasn't just being erased. I was being rewritten. My rage didn't come in a scream. It came as stillness, focus. I picked up the phone, walked to the far end of the courtyard, and sat on the step by the herb garden. Then I opened my camera roll. Months ago, at the vineyard dinner, the night Monica mocked my divorce, I'd filmed a short clip. The lighting was low, but the audio was sharp. Dylan slurring his words, Monica rolling her eyes, someone whispering, "She's not gonna last the whole trip." I uploaded it to my laptop, clipped out a 10-second section, overlaid it with a single sentence. Full context is coming. Then I paused. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. So I opened a blank document. I began typing what really happened. The timeline. The night at the vineyard. The fight. The van. The bakery. The stolen job. The email I never sent. I backed it up with dates, screenshots, journal pages, faces, words, context. Then I turned to Martha, who was watching from the doorway, arms crossed over her apron. "I need to say something," I told her, "but it has to be in French." She nodded, disappeared, then returned with a pen and a notepad. We worked on it together. No one has the right to erase your voice. She underlined it, then smiled. By midnight, I had posted a new video. No music, no filter. Just me, sitting in the courtyard, reading my letter. First in French, then in English. I didn't cry. I didn't blink too much. I looked into the lens like I was speaking to the person who mattered most. Myself. The caption read, "They took the narrative. I'm taking it back." I turned off the phone. They didn't back down, so I didn't either. The next morning came quietly. Too quietly. The usual hum of the village waking up felt muted. Or maybe it was just me. My nerves, raw after the post, were pulling at the edges of every sound. I hadn't slept, not really. I'd turned the phone off after hitting publish, but my mind kept spinning. I was in the middle of folding fresh linens when my inbox pinged. Dana. Subject: need to talk. Urgent. Her message was short. "Hey Callie, quick heads up. Someone reached out to our team last week claiming to be your legal representative. They submitted a portfolio under your name. The work looks like yours. Just tweaked. Watermarked by a company I've never heard of. It felt off, thought I'd check. My heart stopped. Attached was a JPEG. I opened it. It was mine, my design. The rustic modern cafe concept I'd sketched after the divorce. My layout, my palette, even the same notes about repurposed wood and natural light. But my name was gone. In its place, a slick new logo, Vantage Studio. A company I didn't know, a watermark I didn't create. My blood went cold. They hadn't just tried to discredit me online. They were trying to be me. I immediately dialed Dana. Her voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the hesitation. I thought it was strange, she said, so I asked for credentials. The reply came from a man named R. Davis. Said he was your brother-in-law and had power of attorney. I sat down. Hard. Reed. Of course it was Reed. Did he send anything else? I asked. Dana hesitated. Yeah, a signed release. Digital. Looked official. I closed my eyes, jaw tight. I never signed anything. And I hadn't. Not a release. Not a waiver. Nothing. But years ago, Reed had helped clean up my digital life after the marriage started falling apart. He had my old passwords, my digital signature stored on our joint drive. He'd used it. They were using me as their ghost designer. I hung up and paced the courtyard in front of the farmhouse. I could hear Martha inside humming, the scent of orange zest drifting from the kitchen window. I pulled up my Google Drive, frantically typing keywords. Found it. My original cafe design file. Time-stamped. Metadata intact. The layers, the process. A digital fingerprint. Proof. I brought my laptop into the local cafe, where the owner, Lucian, spoke good English. Between his spotty legal knowledge and my translator app, we crafted a cease and desist letter. I forwarded it to Dana, along with the metadata and a new digital signature. Subject line, "This is mine." She responded in minutes. Got it. This helps. I'm pulling back from the other submission. For a moment, I just sat there, hands shaking, staring at the screen. They hadn't just stranded me. They'd tried to build their future with the blueprints of my pain. That night, as the sun fell behind the hills, I sat on the porch with Martha. She brought out 2 mugs of tea and a blanket. We didn't speak much. I watched the olive trees sway and whispered. They tried to bury me with my own roots, but I still have the seeds. She didn't ask what I meant. She just reached over and placed a notepad on the armrest beside me. At the top, she'd written in careful script, Cabinet d'Avocats, Paris. A law firm. Her eyes met mine, steady. Tomorrow I'd call them. But for now, I sat still, not silenced, not erased, just ready. The letter was taped right below the iron latch, flapping gently in the morning breeze. Martha spotted it first when she stepped out with her basket of herbs. She didn't open it, just walked back in and handed it to me like it was a bomb. No name, no return address. The envelope wasn't sealed, just folded neatly, like whoever delivered it wanted speed over formality. Inside was 1 sheet of printer paper, no letterhead, just 12 words. Leave this alone. You've made your point. Don't push it further. I stared at it for a full minute before I realized I was gripping it so tightly my knuckles had gone white. It wasn't signed. Of course it wasn't. But I knew the voice behind those keys. It was the same one that always smiled too wide when I called out the truth. The same tone Reed used when he said, "Let's not make this messy." Martha looked at me, puzzled. Bad news. I handed it over, then pulled out my phone and translated aloud. She read it twice, then met my eyes and shrugged. Good, now they are scared. I laughed once, sharp. That's supposed to scare me, she tilted her head. It only works if you're not already mad. I folded the paper and slipped it into the side pocket of my notebook. No shredding, no burning. I wanted a record of every threat dressed as politeness. I went inside and opened my laptop. 1 folder, labeled Proof. Inside, every timeline I'd built, every screenshot from Dana, the forged email headers, metadata files from my original sketches, A copy of the video Reed edited. A screenshot of the message from Dylan. The legal release with my digital signature, plus my original file showing I'd never authorized anything. I clicked share and sent the entire drive to 2 email addresses. legal@harrowandlentz.fr, Paris law firm Martha had helped me find. Candice.wu@nylawpro.com, Dana's referral. I added a short note. I don't want to sue them yet, but I want the facts to exist somewhere besides my head. If they come again, I won't be unprepared. I hit send and leaned back, watching the blue bar crawl across the screen until it confirmed. Delivered. By mid-afternoon, the nerves had settled into a steady hum of focus. I took a walk through the village, passing the narrow alleyway that led to the courtyard. I stopped for a moment outside the tiny bookstore and watched a young couple inside pick out postcards. They laughed together, touched shoulders. That used to be me and Reed once, before the silencing, the reshaping, the rewrites. I walked on. Later that night, I sat at the bakery's kitchen table with my laptop open again. There was one more thing to do. I opened a new message. No subject. To Monica Davis. I didn't start with hi. I didn't start with dear. I just wrote, this stops here. Not because you asked, but because I say so. That was it. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I hit send. Then I closed the laptop and exhaled. It wasn't over, not legally, not emotionally. But the part where they got to write my story? That part was done. I curled up on the little couch near the window, watching the moon rise over the olive trees. This place, the one they thought would break me, had become my mirror. Not of who I used to be, but of who I refused to stop becoming. I didn't win back everything I'd lost, but I reclaimed the only thing that ever really mattered: myself. The morning after the letter, I brewed tea without rushing. The air had shifted. It wasn't lighter, not yet. But it wasn't crushing me anymore either. The first email came from Dana. We've submitted the formal complaint. The Paris team confirmed a few irregularities in the submission documents, names and sign-offs being flagged. Just wanted you to know, it's in motion. I didn't reply right away. Just sat with the weight of it. Not fear, finality. A few hours later, another message came in. Dylan's video has been taken down across all channels. No statement. Just gone. Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement. But it was something. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't even need the court to agree with me, though I hoped it would. I just needed the paper trail to exist. I needed the truth where it couldn't be rewritten anymore. That was done. By the end of that week, I was officially onboarded as a remote consultant for Dana's firm. The work was sporadic, mostly layout concepts and mood boards, but every email, every assignment felt like a stitch in my own skin, being sewn back with my own hands. I also started contributing to a local blog in Provence, an English-language lifestyle site that spotlighted creative expats. My first piece? Designing in Silence. How leaving Boston gave me back my voice. Martha printed it out and taped it behind the register. In return, I helped her digitize her menu. We sat for hours one evening, translating pastry names and adjusting font sizes. She called it Très Modern, and when the screen blinked to life with a sample menu, she clapped like I'd performed a magic trick. I was still here, and I was building something real. One crisp morning, just as the scent of warm figs filled the bakery's courtyard, Jacques from the hardware shop dropped by. "I hear you're good with design," he said, cradling a basket of olives. "We need someone to help with signs for the harvest route." Then he paused. "Also, we could use an extra hand picking, if you're not too busy." I smiled. I have 2 hands and nowhere else to be. That weekend, I stood barefoot in the middle of an olive grove, mud streaking my arms, my laugh echoing louder than I expected. There was no stage, no filter, just me and the trees and a basket that kept tipping sideways. No one asked me about Monica, or Reed, or Boston. And I didn't offer, not out of secrecy, but because, for the first time, they weren't the loudest thing in my life anymore. One evening, I returned to the bench outside the bakery, the same one where I'd once sat stunned and silent, trying to understand how people who claimed to love me could vanish like that. I pulled out my journal and wrote, "That version of me would never believe we made it here." Then, I added a line underneath. "Some roots get ripped out. Some get replanted. I'm both." I closed the notebook and stared at the hills, the trees catching the last light of day. Before bed, I checked my email one last time. A single unread message. From Monica Davis, subject, "None. I hope you're well. Maybe someday we can talk." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Instead, I placed my phone face down, turned off the light, and slipped into sleep with the windows open. The wind moved gently through the olive branches, like a breath I could finally exhale. I wasn't healed completely. I didn't need to be. But I was whole enough to keep walking forward, on ground I had chosen. Maybe I'll tell the full story someday. But for now, I have bread to bake and sketches to finish. And that's more than enough. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most aren't strangers. They're the ones who shared your childhood, your holidays, your home. And when they rewrite your story to make themselves look better, it can feel like you've lost everything: your voice, your worth, your truth. But here's what I've learned. You don't have to stay silent to keep the peace. You don't have to keep shrinking so others feel bigger. And you don't have to wait for permission to take your life back. For a long time, I thought healing meant going back to who I was. But now I know. It means becoming who I was never allowed to be. So if you've ever felt erased, abandoned, or made to feel like you were too much or not enough, I want you to know you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are becoming. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what they feared most. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild from a betrayal? Did this story remind you of something you've lived through? Or still trying to rise above? If this video touched something in you, drop A or just type 1 in the comments. And if it didn't resonate with you, that's okay too. Let me know what didn't click. I genuinely want to grow with this community. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thanks for being here. You matter. Hello, my name is Kira. 5 years ago, at a family party, my sister humiliated me in front of everyone, slapping me across the face and calling me trash. And the worst part? My mother stayed silent. But here's the thing. I never let that moment define me. Now, 5 years later, I run the company she begged for a job at. But what if I told you it wasn't just about the slap or the humiliation? It was about the years of being overlooked, erased, and pushed to the edge. Would you believe that what was meant to break me ended up making me stronger? The truth about family can be dark, and sometimes it takes years to finally get your revenge. But the real question is, what happens when you stop asking for permission to be seen? The air in Savannah always carried a mix of jasmine and judgment. At least it did whenever the family gathered. I remember that day as vividly as if it were seared into my skin. Mother's 58th birthday. Backyard. Catered. Dozens of white folding chairs lined up in rows like they were prepared for a wedding instead of a family party. The garden twinkled with fairy lights strung between crepe myrtle trees, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a Southern lifestyle magazine spread. I arrived late. I always did. Not because I wanted to, but because showing up early gave them more time to remind me I didn't belong. I wore a navy dress I'd borrowed from Cora, my dad's sister. It fit a little loose at the shoulders, a little tight at the waist. I wasn't comfortable, but it was clean, and that was the best I could offer. "Look who finally made it," a voice called from the porch. Seraphine, my sister, older by 6 years, sharper by reputation. Everything about her screamed perfection, her posture, her dress, her champagne glass dangling from 2 fingers like it was an accessory. She didn't hug me, didn't even walk over. Just smiled that half smile that never reached her eyes. "You still using Mom's old Honda?" she asked, not even pretending to whisper. The group near her laughed, soft and polite, not because the joke was funny, but because it was expected. I nodded. It gets me where I need to be. That's what they say about cockroaches, too, she added, sipping her drink. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. That's how it always was. She threw the punches, and I took them with a smile and an internal prayer that someday someone would notice. The food hadn't even been served yet. I tried to find a quiet corner near the lemon tree where the servers weren't hovering, where I could pretend to check my phone. But even there, their voices reached me. You know, Seraphine could have gone to New York, someone said. She stayed for the family, someone else replied. That was the myth they built around her. The dutiful daughter, the gifted CEO, the one who carried the family name like a crown. And me? I was the asterisk, the cautionary tale. What they didn't know, what they refused to know, was that I was the one who helped Seraphine start that business. I was the one who pulled all-nighters designing her first pitch deck, writing her copy, testing her product interface when no one else believed in her. And when the cameras came, when the investors showed up, she acted like I was the intern who forgot to show up. I swallowed it for years, until she made it clear that day that swallowing wasn't enough. Later, when the cake had been cut and the drinks poured, Seraphine made her move. She walked up to the garden center like it was a stage. Everyone turned to look. She didn't toast our mother. She didn't thank the guests. She looked at me. Kira, she began, her voice too loud, too sweet. You remember that time you tried to write code? A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. You downloaded a virus instead, took down my laptop. Said you were building an empire, she said, eyes gleaming with mock affection. That was 5 years ago, I replied, steady. Some dreams should stay dead, sis. The air shifted. The music paused. Someone coughed. No one moved to stop her. You know what your problem is? She asked, stepping closer, heels sharp against the stone path. I didn't answer. Didn't blink. You walk around like the world owes you something just because you showed up. But you never do the work. You're a leech. Always have been. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, she slapped me, hard. The sound cracked like a gunshot across the garden. I staggered back. My hand flew to my cheek. The sting bloomed fast, hot, humiliating. The silence that followed was louder than the slap. No one said a word. Not Aunt May, who I once drove to her biopsy. Not Uncle James, who I helped cover rent when his job fell through. Not even Cora, who stood frozen near the dessert table. And my mother. She looked down at her plate. Mom? I whispered. She didn't raise her head. You always make things dramatic, she said, barely audible. That was it. Not stop. Not apologize. Just a sentence so quiet and sharp it cut deeper than Seraphine's hand. I stood there for another beat, long enough to feel my shame solidify into something colder, heavier. Then I turned. No one stopped me. No one followed. The garden lights blurred as I walked, not because I cried, but because my eyes refused to stay dry. My heels caught the gravel, then the sidewalk. I didn't even wait for a ride. I walked 2 miles to the nearest bus stop. It was past 9 when I got there. My dress was wrinkled. My hair smelled like citronella. I sat alone on a rusted bench, wiping the makeup off my cheek with a cocktail napkin. A car passed. A couple laughed. The world kept going. I didn't even pack a bag. Just left, carrying only that one sentence. Trash like you. The bus left Savannah just past midnight. I didn't know where it was going, and I didn't care. When the driver asked, "Where to?" I stared blankly at the schedule board and picked the one with the fewest stops. Houston. I had never been there. I didn't know anyone who lived there. That was the whole point. My dress still smelled faintly of gardenia and barbecue smoke. My cheek throbbed where Seraphine's hand had landed. My phone buzzed once with a text from a number I didn't recognize, some distant cousin probably asking if I was okay. I didn't open it. I powered the phone off and dropped it in the bottom of my bag. There were 5 other passengers on that bus. 2 elderly women headed to visit grandkids, a guy in a hoodie who never looked up from his headphones, and a tired-looking mother with a sleeping toddler across her lap. No one made eye contact, which suited me fine. I wrapped my arms around my torso and curled into the seat, pressing my forehead against the cold window. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that already. By the time we crossed into Louisiana, the early sun had turned the sky a soft orange. I hadn't slept. My body ached in ways I couldn't name. At a rest stop, I bought a gas station coffee and a pack of peanut butter crackers. The cashier didn't smile. I didn't either. We pulled into Houston early the next afternoon. I stepped off the bus with a backpack, $200 in my wallet, and no plan. The city smelled like concrete and humidity. I walked until I found a cheap motel near a gas station. The guy at the front desk asked how long I was staying. I told him a week, lying to us both. The room was small, stained carpet, flickering light, a bed with a quilt that felt like sandpaper, but the door locked, the water ran, and I had privacy. That was more than I'd had in years. I started taking whatever jobs I could find on the street boards, restaurant cleanup, unloading boxes at a furniture warehouse, passing out flyers in parking lots. I didn't tell anyone my last name. I barely told them my first. People didn't ask. That was the beauty of being invisible. At night, I'd sit at the room's tiny desk and write in a notebook I labeled in thick black marker. Don't need them. The first page was a list. Names of everyone who stood silent when I needed them. I didn't write reasons, just names. One by one, I drew a line through them. On the fifth night, I walked to the library downtown. It was cool and quiet, a safe place filled with strangers who didn't care what I'd done or who I wasn't. I sat at one of the public computers and opened my email. The inbox was empty except for junk and an auto payment confirmation for my old student loan. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote to my mother. I didn't ask for money. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. What did I do that made it okay for you to stay silent? I kept it short. 4 sentences. I stared at the send button for a long time before clicking it. 3 hours later, her reply came. Hope you learn to stop playing the victim. That was it. No greeting, no punctuation, not even her name at the end. I remember staring at that line on the screen until it blurred. Not because I cried, but because something in me broke free. The last thread. The final illusion that maybe, just maybe, if I just worked harder, loved harder, waited longer, she'd see me, she saw me, and chose not to care. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix it. 2 days later, Cora called. I hadn't saved her number, but I recognized her voice immediately. She sounded hesitant, like someone holding a fragile box. I heard what happened, she said quietly. I didn't know what she meant. There were too many options. Your mom, she never told Seraphine that the money came from you. I froze. What money? The 10,000, she said. When Seraphine's startup was failing, you wired it through my account. You asked me to keep it discreet. You remember? I remembered. I remembered working double shifts, skipping meals, selling the last pieces of furniture from my tiny apartment just to scrape that money together. I remembered trusting Cora to deliver it anonymously, so Seraphine wouldn't feel ashamed. But I'd assumed my mother would tell her. She said it was better not to mention it, Cora continued. Said it would just complicate things. Complicate things. Like truth was a burden she couldn't be bothered to carry. She told the family I'd stepped in to help, Cora admitted. I didn't want credit, Kira. I thought she'd tell them. I swear. I wanted to scream, but there was no point. It wasn't Cora's betrayal that hurt. It was my mother's. Again. She hadn't just failed to defend me in public. She'd actively erased me in private. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice even. Kira, I should have spoken up. It's done, I said, and hung up before she could say more. I went back to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow and steady. Then I opened my notebook again, flipped to a new page. At the top, I wrote, New rules, no more begging for belonging, no more explanations, protect your peace at all costs. The next morning, I returned to the library, not for email, not for family. I typed in, how to learn to code for free. That's how it started. A Google search, a free video series, a beginner's guide to Python that I didn't understand a word of at first. But I didn't stop. I checked out books with cracked spines and torn covers. I copied code into the free Notepad software on the public desktop. I failed every small assignment, but I showed up. I kept coming back. I stopped trying to be seen. From now on, I'd build things no one could ignore. I didn't respond to the invitation. I didn't even consider it. The email from my cousin sat unopened in my inbox for 2 days, staring at me like the ghost of my old life. It felt like the universe was mocking me, offering me a seat at the family table that no longer existed. My name was listed as guest of Seraphine. The words punched me in the stomach. There it was, a line drawn in invisible ink, a sign of how far I'd fallen, how invisible I'd become. I wasn't even a real guest anymore, just an extension of Seraphine, the version of me she was willing to allow in the same room. I didn't need to read it any further. I deleted the email before my finger could shake. Not one reply, not one word to explain the hurt. There were no excuses left. Just this, an email with an invitation that wasn't meant for me. In the quiet of my tiny apartment in Houston, I felt a hollow ache spread through my chest. It wasn't just the slap anymore. It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was all of it. The erasure, the invisibility. All the love and care I'd put into Seraphine's business, everything I'd given, only to be erased in front of the people who should have supported me. It wasn't enough to be better than her. I'd spent years being better, and what did I have to show for it? A broken relationship with my family and an endless list of things that I'd given up for people who didn't care. I closed my eyes, trying to fight the cold anger creeping through me, but all I could feel was the weight of rejection. I had tried so hard. I had begged for their understanding, for some acknowledgement that I was here, that I mattered. But now, the only thing that remained was the echo of a family that never saw me. I remembered the late nights back in Savannah when Seraphine's startup was in its infancy. I was the one who stayed up, nights after nights, long past midnight, planning her branding and designing her logo. I wrote pitch decks that helped her secure investors. I researched her competitors, pieced together the strategy that eventually got her on national television. But when the cameras rolled, when the spotlight hit, Seraphine said, "I built this alone. I always had the vision." I watched it from a break room in a warehouse where I worked my shifts, one of many odd jobs I had to make ends meet, while Seraphine made her millions. She didn't mention me, didn't mention that I was the one who gave up my weekends and sleep to help her. I always had the vision. I wanted to scream at the TV, but there was no point in that. What was left to scream for? What had I given up for this betrayal? I stood up abruptly and grabbed my coat, walking out of the tiny room that had become my life. The anger hadn't even hit yet. It was too cold, too calculating, too deep. Now, I was in Houston, alone, in a city where no one knew me, where no one cared to remember my name. Not even Seraphine, not even my own mother, who had erased my contributions as if they didn't matter. The anger didn't come right away. First, there was silence. A deep, heavy silence that swallowed everything I had ever been. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't go on pretending anymore. I wasn't going to stay hidden. I wasn't going to keep pretending I was fine. I wouldn't let them make me invisible anymore. In the library that day, I logged onto a free computer and began looking up ways to learn coding. It wasn't much, just a few basics, HTML, Python. It was all I could afford. I downloaded a few tutorials, started working through them, and failed miserably at first. But something in me had changed. I wasn't running from my problems anymore. I was running towards something, toward proving to them all, Seraphine, my mother, the people who'd forgotten me, that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. That evening, as I sat in my rundown apartment, typing out the lines of code for the first time, I could feel a shift inside. It wasn't just about coding anymore. It was about becoming someone no one could ignore. I opened my red notebook that I kept hidden from view, the one titled Invisible Evidence, and started writing. I wrote every single moment of betrayal I could remember. All the times they dismissed me, erased me, overlooked me. I didn't want to forget. I wanted to remember it all. Not for revenge, but as a reminder of what I had been forced to endure, what they had thought they could take from me. And I realized something. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I never had. As weeks went by, I kept working at my coding lessons. Every day, I walked to the library to use their free Wi-Fi. Every day I showed up, trying and failing, but never stopping. I never asked for their approval. I never asked them to see me. Instead, I told myself, build like no one's watching. Build something that can't be erased. Eventually, I applied for an online scholarship for a tech boot camp. I didn't expect to hear back. But one day, an email arrived. I opened it slowly, my breath caught in my throat. I had been accepted. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the beginning of something real, something that didn't rely on family to validate me. I smiled. It felt strange. It felt like the first real smile I'd had in a long time. They might have erased my name from the guest list. They might have stolen my contributions, my efforts, and everything I had ever sacrificed. But one day, I'd build something that would make them beg for a seat at my table. It had been a few weeks since I received that email from my cousin. At first, I thought it was just another small sting, a minor reminder that the family I had worked so hard to be a part of was slipping further away from me. But when the details began to settle in, I realized how deep the cut truly was. They were rewriting the family trust, and I wasn't even mentioned. The phone call came late in the afternoon. I had just finished another long day of coding, my hands stiff from hours at the computer, and was unwinding with a cup of coffee when my cousin's name flashed on the screen. I hadn't heard from him in months. "Kira," he said, his voice a little too careful, a little too soft. "I don't know how to say this, but they're rewriting the family trust. Your name's not on it. They're keeping it all in the family, you know?" My stomach dropped. The words hung in the air like a punch I couldn't dodge. "They removed me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. "Don't shoot the messenger, Kira. But yeah, they did." I exhaled, suddenly feeling lightheaded. "They already did. I just didn't die." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, letting the silence settle over me like a thick blanket. What was left to say? What was there to do? The betrayal wasn't just that they'd erased me from the family will, it was that they didn't even care enough to pretend I mattered anymore. A few years ago, my mother had told me something that now felt like a cruel joke. She said, "When I'm gone, at least you'll have a piece of me." It was supposed to be comforting, I guess. A reminder that despite everything, I still had her love, but now that piece had been stripped away, reduced to nothing more than a name on a paper, a footnote in a legal document, a reminder of what I was never going to have. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, the words of my cousin echoing in my mind. I didn't even know how to process it. What did it even mean to be left out? What was left to care about when the very thing that tied me to them, my family, was being severed so completely? I walked to the bathroom, grabbed a lighter, and lit the old family trust that had been printed on paper. It wasn't much. It wasn't going to change anything, but it felt good to watch it burn, to see the evidence of everything I'd tried to build with them turn to ash. As the paper curled up and crumbled in the flame, I thought about all the moments I had worked so hard to protect them, all the times I had been there for Seraphine, for my mom, all the sacrifices I had made. And now, none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered to them. When the ashes settled in the sink, I flushed them down the drain. That was it. That was my final act of releasing them. I was done being the afterthought. Done being erased. I wasn't going to cry about it anymore. I had to face the truth. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about anything they could give me. It was about the fact that they didn't see me. I had been a part of their story for so long, and they had turned me into a ghost. But that was on them. I wasn't going to let their blindness define me anymore. I grabbed my red notebook, my invisible evidence, and flipped it open. I had a new project. This one wasn't about their rejection. This one was about creating something that couldn't be ignored. I started a vision board, placing it on the wall next to my desk. The center read, "Things no one can erase." I printed out my name, bold and bright in the middle, and taped it to the board. No one could erase me anymore. No one. I had to believe that. If I didn't, there would be nothing left. The next day, I sat down at my desk again. There was no more waiting for their approval. No more hoping they'd finally see me. Yes, I opened my laptop and started to email the lawyer handling the estate. Please remove my contact from all future family matters. I waive any rights, because I was never given any voice, I typed, each word coming out sharper than the last. I didn't bother checking the tone. There was no need to soften it. I was done asking for permission. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their permission. I hit send. The email was short, clean, and final. There would be no more ties, no more pulling me back into their world of invisible existence. I was taking back control. For the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I was building something that couldn't be undone. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I knew I'd never hear from them again, but I wanted to make sure they couldn't reach me, even if they tried. I archived all the family threads, unfollowed everyone on social media, and shut down every avenue they could use to find me. I was getting ready to disappear. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I spent the next few weeks pouring every ounce of energy into building my business. I finished the first prototype of the logistics app I had been working on for months. I applied for online scholarships, hoping one of them would finally give me a chance to prove to myself that I could do this. I couldn't keep looking back, couldn't keep hoping they'd see me. I had to build something bigger than them, bigger than any of the family drama, the betrayal, the silence. And when it was done, when I finally had something that could stand on its own, I would be the one in control. The next time they reached for me, I wouldn't be within reach. The morning after, I sat at my desk, scrolling through emails, when a subject line caught my eye. Seraphine M. Job application. For a moment, I thought I must have misread it. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The name burned through the words. Seraphine M. She was applying for a job at my company. I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing. The email wasn't long, just a short note. Looking for a fresh start. The message, impersonal and brief, hit me like a sudden wave. But I didn't panic. There was no anger. Not yet. What hit me instead was something more calculated. A decision. A choice that would shift everything. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to think. A wave of disappointment washed over me as I realized the significance. This wasn't just any job application. It was Seraphine asking for help. After all these years, after everything she had done, she was turning to me, but not directly. She was playing the same game, still, and that's when the clarity hit. I didn't need to act out of anger. I didn't need to respond immediately. I could wait. I could make her feel the weight of what she had done. A few hours later, I got up from my desk and walked down to the lobby. I could feel my heartbeat slowly in my chest, steady but firm. I wasn't going to rush this. When Seraphine arrived at my office, she had no idea who she was walking into. She was pristine, polished, the same Seraphine I had always known. The assistant greeted her at the door, guiding her to a chair in the waiting area. She was looking for a way back in. But what she didn't know was that the doors had been shut long ago, and I was the one holding the keys now. I stood at the threshold of my office, watching her sit there, waiting patiently. Part of me was ready to get up and face her, to finally say everything I had held in for years. But I didn't. I stayed in the doorway, watching her squirm. I had the control now, and it was a power I wasn't going to relinquish. And then the moment came. I made my way down the hallway, crossing the lobby as if I had all the time in the world. When I entered the waiting area, Seraphine turned and her face dropped. She wasn't prepared to see me. Her eyes widened as she stood up, a hesitant smile creeping across her face. Kira? Her voice trembled slightly, unsure if this was a joke or not. I gave her the smallest of smiles, the kind that didn't quite reach my eyes. Thank you for applying, I said, my voice even, controlled. Unfortunately, we don't accept family. I watched as the words sank in, her face flushing with confusion. Her hands started to fidget, and I saw the panic setting in. Kira, it's not what it looks like. I've changed. I've learned from everything. But I stopped her with a simple gesture, a hand lifted slightly, silencing her. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice calm and unwavering. It's clarity. I turned my back on her, not giving her a second chance to respond. The power was mine now. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her. I walked back into my office, closing the door behind me. It wasn't the kind of victory that felt sweet. It was quiet. It was clean. And it was final. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The rest of the day passed in a blur, the normal office hustle resuming as though nothing had happened. But I could feel it. The tension was different now. My assistant seemed to be walking on eggshells. My team just a little more cautious around me. They could sense something had changed, but none of them asked, none of them dared. I could have deleted the security footage. I could have kept the evidence of Seraphine's humiliation, but I didn't need it, not anymore. I walked to my office whiteboard and jotted down a quote that had been on my mind all day. Don't chase closure, become it. I stood there for a moment, looking at the words. It felt right. Everything I had been through, everything I had endured, had brought me here. And now, I was in control. Later, as the sun began to set and the city started to slow down, I sat in my office, reviewing a new proposal for the logistics app I had been building. The app was becoming my escape, my sanctuary from the family I had left behind. It wasn't just business anymore. It was me. It was mine. But clarity, as it turned out, had a price. I was ready for it, though. I wasn't afraid of the consequences. I had already made my peace with that. The silence between me and Seraphine, between me and the rest of my family, spoke volumes. I was no longer the girl they could manipulate, no longer the daughter who begged for a place at their table. I was building my own now. But clarity, as I was about to learn, rarely came without a price. The phone buzzed on my desk, and I glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "Are you going to leave us like this, Kira?" it read. I didn't even need to see the name. I knew exactly who it was. The day after I sent the email to the lawyer, I found myself sitting at my desk, staring blankly at the screen. The weight of the decision hadn't fully hit me yet, but I knew it was coming. I had set everything in motion, made my peace with the past. But as I scanned through my social media feed, something caught my eye. An ad, a post from a tech conference. Seraphine. Her smiling face beamed from the screen, and her name flashed under the title, Innovative Logistics Algorithm, A New Vision. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link. There it was. Word for word, line by line. The idea I'd developed, the designs I'd created, the pitches I had written. All of it, now wrapped in a shiny new package and presented as her own. I stared at the screen, disbelief mixing with rage. She had taken everything I'd worked on, everything I'd poured myself into. I clenched my fists, my breath shallow. It wasn't just an idea stolen. It was my identity, erased. She was trying to rewrite our history, and I was nowhere in the picture. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I clicked open another window, and there, buried in my old files, was the pitch deck I'd made. The mock-ups, the branding, the very concept of the logistics app, all mine. And now Seraphine was standing in front of a crowd, claiming it as hers. My pulse pounded in my ears as I dove deeper, scrolling through the white paper she had published. The graphics, the phrases, the language, every single part of it was lifted directly from what I'd written. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. She hadn't just stolen my idea. She was repeating history, making sure that I would never be seen, never be acknowledged. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I drafted my thoughts. But this time, I didn't hit send. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I knew what I had to do. I called my legal team that afternoon. The conversation was brief, efficient. They were ready to fight back. I had evidence. I had my records, my emails, the timestamps. This wasn't a small theft. This was industrial sabotage, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. But then, as I sat there, the weight of everything else I had been through slowly settled into my chest. This wasn't just about stealing my idea. It was about everything I'd been pushed into the shadows for, about being erased from the family story. It was about control. It was about power. I remembered the last time I had done nothing. The years of silence, the years of pretending I wasn't hurt. I'd let that happen once before. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I pushed back my chair, feeling the cool air of the office hit my face as I stood. The decision had been made. There was no going back. I had to act. I sat down, my fingers moving steadily across the keys, drafting the cease and desist letter. It was formal, it was concise, and it was final. But I wasn't done. I paused for a moment, then opened Twitter. I hesitated for a second before typing the words that felt like the only truth left. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them climb a ladder you built, then removing the last rung. I posted it without hesitation. By the time I returned to my desk, my assistant had already sent me a follow-up email. "Wasn't she here last week?" the assistant asked, a hint of concern in her voice. I didn't look up. My hands were still resting on the keyboard, but I was already thinking beyond this moment. "Now she knows what she missed," I said, voice calm, collected, and unwavering. I closed the screen, letting the words sit in the air for a moment. The past was catching up to me, and this was only the beginning. The office around me hummed with its usual activity. My team carried on with their tasks, but I could feel it, the tension. Everyone sensed something had changed. They just didn't know what. The phone buzzed again. It was another email. I sighed as I opened it, reading the name at the top. Seraphine. The subject line was simple. Job application. I clicked it open, and my heart sank. She was trying again, but this time, there was no pleading. There was no desperation. Just a short, cold message. "I'm ready for a fresh start." It wasn't that I didn't feel sorry for her. It wasn't even that I hated her, but I was done being the one who reached out, done being the one who asked for validation from a family that had never truly seen me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type a response. But I didn't. I closed the email, staring at the screen for a long time. Instead of responding, I deleted her message, every single trace of her. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't frustrated. I was something else now. I was in control. I looked up at the clock, the seconds ticking away. In that moment, I realized something that had never been more clear to me. They had erased me, but I would rebuild myself. I would make them see me. I would make them need me. The silence in my office felt heavier than it ever had before. The moment I saw the email pop up on my screen, I knew it was coming. My legal team had just filed the cease and desist, a clear message to Seraphine to stop pretending she owned what was mine. And in response, she did what she always did best. She took to social media. I clicked open the post. It was vague, cryptic, but the words felt like a slap across my face. "Some people pretend to build things just to steal the spotlight later," she wrote. A few emojis followed. The usual suspects, the sad face, the broken heart, the pleading hands. Classic Seraphine, always playing the victim. The post was quickly gaining traction. I could already feel the storm brewing as her followers, some of them old family friends, began commenting with concern. "You okay? Looks like she's hurting," one texted me. It wasn't the first time I'd been subjected to gaslighting. It wasn't even the second. At this point, it was just a tiring, repeated cycle. I didn't answer. Not a word. I let the storm swirl around me, let them wonder, let them doubt me, let them take sides. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fight back immediately. The fire in my chest wasn't as intense as it used to be. The anger wasn't as explosive. I felt controlled, more like I was watching a game unfold and wasn't a part of it anymore. The next day, I went for a long walk. The streets of Austin felt more alive than ever. The city hummed around me. People, traffic, the constant rhythm of life. It was a reminder that the world kept turning, whether I was in it or not. But as I walked, I could feel the weight of everything settling in. Seraphine wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was erasing me, making sure no one ever knew the truth of what happened. She had already tried to steal my ideas. Now she was trying to steal my voice. Back at the office, I buried myself in my work. I wasn't going to play her game, not anymore, not when the stakes were this high. Then, the phone rang. It was from my legal team. They'd tracked something down. A leak, an unexpected turn of events. A former contractor from Seraphine's team had sent us a video. I watched it in my office, eyes glued to the screen. The footage was grainy at first, but it became clearer as the video progressed. It showed Seraphine backstage at a tech conference, rehearsing lines. She was crying, wiping her eyes, practicing how to speak to the cameras, talking about how hard things had been for her. But that wasn't the worst part. She was playing the victim, and this wasn't real. It wasn't genuine. It was all an act. She was practicing how to manipulate her audience, how to tell a story that wasn't hers. I sat there, stunned, as the video played, over and over again in my mind. This wasn't a minor infraction. This was deliberate, calculated sabotage, and I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. The video went viral the next day. As soon as it hit the internet, people started questioning everything about Seraphine's story. #performance. Sister trended on Twitter, and suddenly the narrative she had carefully crafted for so long began to crumble. Exposés started popping up. Anonymous blogs, articles digging deeper into her past, into the things she had done, all while trying to portray herself as the wronged party. Investors started pulling back, questioning her ethics, her ability to lead. It didn't take long for them to realize the truth, that I had been the one behind so much of her so-called vision, that she had used my work to propel herself forward while leaving me in the dust. I felt the satisfaction of knowing the truth was being exposed. But at the same time, I kept my distance. I knew Seraphine would lash out. She had done it before. This time, though, she wouldn't find me as easy to manipulate. Later that afternoon, my assistant came in quietly. "Wasn't she here last week?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. I looked up, smiling just slightly. "Now she knows what she missed," I replied, keeping my tone cool and measured. The truth was, the interview had been the beginning of the end for Seraphine. She didn't know it yet, but she was already fighting a losing battle, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it again. My team continued to work, not asking questions, but they could feel the shift. Something was different. There was no longer any uncertainty in the air. This was my time to act, and I was taking control. Later that night, I took a long look at the security footage, the footage that had been quietly archived by my assistant. I didn't need it. I didn't need to prove anything. The world had already seen enough. I posted one last thing on my social media, a simple line: "Truth defends itself when you're no longer willing to." And then I attached a photo, a picture of the original whiteboard sketches I'd made for the logistics app. The timestamp on the photo was from years ago, before anyone else had even heard of it. I let the post sit there for a few moments before I logged out. The decision was made. The world would know the truth. And if Seraphine didn't like it, well, she'd just have to deal with it. As I walked away from my desk, I knew the game had shifted, and I was in control now. The courtroom was cold, but the air was thick with tension. I had already been here before. The legal back and forth, the high stakes, the game of power. But this time, I wasn't the one being crushed. This time, I was the one standing tall. Seraphine had tried to make one last desperate move. She sent a letter to my board, claiming that I was sabotaging her success, that I was holding back the family, and making decisions for personal revenge. It was classic Seraphine, trying to twist the narrative, make herself the victim, the one who was wronged. But I wasn't having it anymore. My response was simple. I walked into the board meeting with a final dossier in my hand, a neat, organized file of everything that mattered. The email exchanges, the timestamps, the versions of code, everything. There was no more back and forth, no more apologies or explanations. I delivered the facts, clean and precise. "Here," I said, placing the file on the table. "Take a look for yourselves. You don't need my words anymore, just the truth." I stood there, waiting for them to flip through the pages. The room was eerily silent. Finally, someone spoke. A member of the board I hadn't seen much of over the past few years. "This is clear. This is undeniable," he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything was laid out in black and white. The legal team would handle the rest. All I needed to do now was watch Seraphine unravel in front of the world, and that's exactly what happened. The court ruled in my favor. The copyright infringement suit was granted, and Seraphine's company was stripped of its intellectual property rights. Investors pulled out. Fast. They had backed a lie, and now the truth was finally shining through. I had always known that she had used my ideas, my work, to propel herself into success. But seeing it all fall apart, seeing her lose everything, there was a certain satisfaction in it. It wasn't just that I won, it was that the truth was out there for everyone to see. 2 days later, I got a call from my lawyer. "It's over," they said. "She's been dropped from her own company." I couldn't help but feel a cold wave of satisfaction wash over me. Seraphine had spent years building a life based on lies and stolen ideas. Now, it was all crashing down. Her LinkedIn went silent, her personal blog, locked. She wasn't even responding to her closest allies anymore. The public sympathy she once had quickly evaporated. I walked downtown to clear my head, feeling the weight of it all finally lifting. As I passed by a billboard for my company, I looked up and stared at the image of myself, the one they had put up to promote the launch of our new app. The advertisement was a stark reminder of how far I'd come, and how far Seraphine had fallen. I didn't smile. I just felt lighter. I didn't need the applause anymore. The victory was in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had taken control, that I had stopped letting her destroy me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and called Cora. It had been a while since we'd spoken. "It's done," I said, my voice almost whispering. "It's really done." There was a pause on the other end of the line, before Cora's voice came through softly. "You didn't destroy her. You just stopped letting her destroy you." Her words sank in. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about me. It was about taking my power back. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe again. When I hung up, I sat there on the steps outside my office building, letting the weight of the last few months settle into my bones. The battle wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about the fight itself, the strength it took to keep going, even when everything seemed stacked against me. Later that evening, as the sky turned dark and the city lights flickered to life, I received a voicemail. It was from Isolde. I had avoided calling her back after everything that happened, but hearing her voice, even just for a moment, was enough to make me pause. "I don't know how things got here," she said, her voice trembling. "But if you're happy, I'm glad." I didn't call her back, but I saved the message. I didn't know why, but it felt important. Maybe it was a part of me that still wanted to believe, still wanted to think that someday, somehow, we could fix what was broken. But for now, I wasn't ready to make that call. I was finally at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to stop chasing answers. Sometimes, peace comes not from having all the answers, but from surviving the questions. It was a quiet evening when I walked past the guest room, now converted into a reading room. The room, once filled with chaos and the sounds of childhood squabbles, had transformed. The bed had been replaced by a reading nook, a soft armchair sitting beneath the window. A few books lined the shelves, and on the desk, a framed notebook sat sealed in glass. It was the notebook I'd carried for years, filled with scribbled ideas, dreams, and blueprints for things that never were. I dusted the frame, but didn't touch the notebook. There was a certain peace that came with seeing it here. Untouched, preserved. The girl who once held this book had grown into someone else entirely, someone strong, someone who had learned to let go. But the past never truly leaves. It lingers in corners, in rooms like this, in the empty space where Seraphine used to be. I shook my head and turned away. The dinner I hosted that evening wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about creating something new, something grounded in choice and authenticity. I had learned the hard way that family wasn't always about blood. I watched as the people I had surrounded myself with filled my apartment, a group of friends and colleagues who had become my chosen family. Everyone brought something homemade, a casserole, a pie, a bottle of wine. No one was looking for approval. No one was trying to impress anyone. We just gathered, connected, and shared. One of them raised their glass. "To the family we choose," they toasted. The words hung in the air for a moment. I didn't need the spotlight, didn't need to stand and say anything. I just took my glass, raised it silently, and joined in. The warmth of that moment filled me in a way I hadn't expected. I looked out at the city skyline from my balcony, wine in hand. The lights blurred together in a beautiful sea of motion. I didn't need to make a grand statement. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had everything I needed right here. As the night wore on, the conversations grew louder, more relaxed. It was just the way I liked it. Easy, comfortable. No false pretenses. The warmth of the room, the laughter, the food. It was everything I had worked for. Not the recognition, not the vindication, but the freedom to be who I truly was, surrounded by the people who truly saw me. But that night, something unexpected happened. During a meeting the next week, we were discussing an upcoming project when one of the interns, a young woman named Emma, was belittled by a vendor. He'd made a comment about her work, something that had nothing to do with her skills, but everything to do with his ego. I could feel the tension rising in the room. Emma's face flushed red, her eyes glassy. She tried to hold it together, but I could see she was close to tears. I didn't hesitate. I stopped the meeting mid-sentence. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. "We don't allow disrespect in this building, especially to those still learning." The room fell silent. Emma's shoulders trembled, but I could see the relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. "Are you okay?" I asked her after the meeting. She nodded, but the tears had already begun to fall. I handed her a note, something simple but significant. "You're seen. You're not alone." The words I once wished someone had said to me. The truth was, I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to Seraphine or anyone else. I had moved on. But seeing someone else feel the weight of what I had felt, seeing them rise above it, made everything feel right. Later that day, I sat down and wrote a letter to Seraphine. I knew I'd never send it. I had nothing left to say to her. But I needed to write it, to let the last of it go. It wasn't a letter filled with anger or bitterness. It wasn't about revenge. It was simply reflective. "I hope you find peace. But I've found mine without you." I folded the letter and set it aside. It was over. There was no need to revisit it. The truth had already been spoken. The rest of the week passed by in a blur of meetings, work, and quiet reflection. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had fought for what was right, and now I was free. One evening, I took a walk along the river trail in Austin. The sun was just setting, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange. The sounds of the city were distant, and all I could hear was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. I thought about everything that had happened, the battles, the losses, the moments that had nearly broken me. But in the end, they hadn't broken me. They had shaped me into something stronger. I stopped at a bench, looking out at the river, and allowed myself a moment of peace. I could hear my voice in my head, like a quiet narration. "They thought they broke me," I whispered to myself. "They didn't. They built the walls I needed to grow in peace." I smiled faintly to myself and looked up. The last frame wasn't of me. It was of my name, lit up on a building downtown. My work, my creation, my legacy. I had made it. I had survived. And for the first time in years, I knew what it felt like to truly be free. As we wrap up Kira's journey, it's clear that true strength comes from within, not from the people who try to tear us down. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about confrontation, but about building something they can't take away. It's a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, you have the power to rise above and take control of your own destiny. What would you do if you were in Kira's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience, revenge, and triumph. Hello, I'm Sorella. I used to think silence meant peace until my sister got pregnant and my mother told me to move out of the home I built with my own hands. Said it was too quiet for someone like me. Said it would be better used for a baby. They measured the walls for a crib while I was still living there. They threw a baby shower in my house, called it Elowin's New Beginning, while I watched from the top of the stairs, invisible. Then I found the lease, the fake lease with my name on it. They thought I'd go quietly, but what happens when the quiet one decides not to fold anymore? The early May morning in Portland had that soft, forgiving breeze that made my backyard feel like the only place that understood silence. I was on my knees in the dirt, thinning out basil shoots, the scent of lemon balm wafting in from the left planter box. I liked mornings like this. They made me feel whole, capable. The house stood behind me, just as I'd made it, quiet, warm, unbothered. Every shelf, every shade of paint, every fixture had been picked and placed by my hand. I was washing the soil from my fingers in the kitchen sink when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. Not uncommon, but always unsettling. I answered with a quiet, "Hi, Mom," bracing for whatever urgent yet trivial thing she'd decided couldn't wait. "Elowin's expecting," she said, chipper. No hello, no pause. Just a statement, launched like it had been waiting on the tip of her tongue. My heart paused. What? She's having a baby. Isn't that wonderful? But listen, she needs a quiet place, something stable for the baby. And your house? Well, it just makes the most sense. My hand tightened around the phone. You're saying you want her to live here? Well, not just visit. It's really best if she moves in. She's going to need the space. You live alone, and honestly, honey, it's such a big house for just one person. I said nothing. She didn't stop. Elowin and Dorian need stability. She'll be nursing. She's tired all the time. Lord knows she won't be able to manage stairs or noise at that apartment downtown. You've always said this place is too quiet. Now that silence could actually be useful. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Mom, I live here. This is my house. Yes, of course, sweetie. I didn't mean it like that. But think about what's fair. You don't have kids. Elowin's starting a family. There it was. It had always been like this, since we were kids. Elowin got the bigger room because she needed space for her creativity. I got the leftover furniture, the passed-down things, the "you're fine with less, right?" kind of love. I'll think about it, I muttered. Wonderful, she chirped. We'll come by tomorrow around lunch to look at the space. Bring some measuring tape, maybe. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, hands still dripping from the sink, water pooling on the tiled floor. My reflection in the microwave's black glass looked tired. Not old, but worn, like something used but well kept. I dried my hands slowly, carefully, as if every second gave me a chance to undo the last 5 minutes. By noon the next day, the doorbell rang. I didn't answer it. Didn't need to. The lock clicked. Elowin had a spare key, of course. Hello? Her voice sang down the hall. I'm in the kitchen, I called, already regretting it. She walked in first, hair curled, belly already slightly pronounced beneath a soft green knit dress. Vera followed, holding a plastic grocery bag and a small measuring tape. Without even setting the bag down, Elowin walked past me and opened the fridge. No oat milk? She said, half joking. I'm trying to go dairy-free for the baby. You don't mind if we stock a few things here, right? I forced a smile. It's your call, I guess. She didn't hear the edge in my voice, or ignored it. They moved from room to room like realtors, not family. Vera ran her hand along the hallway trim like she was inspecting a model home. Elowin tapped on the living room wall. I could mount the white noise machine here, she said. Maybe a floating shelf with little stuffed animals. You know, minimalist but sweet. Then she turned and rubbed her belly, like she was already making the announcement to Instagram. I think the guest room could work, but honestly, she looked at me, the master would be better, more light. I'll be waking up for feedings, and that bed is way better for my back. My mouth was dry. You want the master bedroom? It's just more practical, Vera said, matter-of-factly. She's pregnant, Sorella. These things matter. You'll understand when. There it was again, that unfinished sentence I'd heard versions of my entire life, the one that dangled just long enough to sting. When I have kids, when I get married. When I stop being the weird one who fixes up old houses and edits books instead of people. Look, Elowen said, smiling sweetly. We're not asking forever, just until we can get settled. Think of it like sharing. Sharing, like it was a sleepover. Like this wasn't the one place I'd built by myself, for myself after everything I'd lost. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. Instead, I made tea. We sat around the table, Elowen making Pinterest plans for her Serenity nursery, Vera chiming in about color palettes and baby-safe fabrics. They never asked if I was okay with any of it. That evening, after they'd left, after they'd talked about my house like it was a hotel they'd just booked, I walked through every room and touched each surface like I was trying to anchor myself to it. The doorknobs I'd replaced, the light switch covers I'd painted to match the new walls, the crack in the window I hadn't gotten around to fixing, not because I forgot, but because I liked how it caught the light. I wasn't sentimental, not usually, but that night, I felt like I was already being ghosted out of my own life. I sat in bed and opened the folder of home renovation photos on my laptop. There was a picture from 2 years ago, my hands covered in plaster, grinning beside a half-installed bookshelf. I scrolled and scrolled. Then the message came in. Start thinking about storage. Baby's due in 4 months. From Elowen. I stared at the text for a full minute, then I deleted it, not because I agreed, because I needed the space to think. I didn't light the candle for symbolism. I lit it because the overhead light gave me headaches, and I'd been staring at documents for hours. It was practical, just enough to see the pages fanned out across my dining table without bathing the whole room in artificial glare. On the left, the fake lease, sharp black ink on thick, smug paper. On the right, the original deed, pulled from my fireproof box with hands that didn't shake. Still crisp, despite being nearly 10 years old. My name centered on the page like a line drawn in the dirt. Sloan Turner, sole owner. No co-signers. No cohabitants. No room for revision. I sipped from a mug of tea I'd forgotten to finish hours ago. Lukewarm. Bitter. Appropriate. I titled the folder on my laptop. They think I won't fight. The next morning, the sun wandered into the kitchen like nothing had changed, like my whole foundation hadn't shifted overnight. It filtered through the curtains in slats of pale gold, soft on the surface but indifferent to the weight pressing against my chest. That's when Vera showed up. Again. No warning, no text, just a knock, barely audible, and the unmistakable click of the door opening, the old key sliding in like it belonged, because I hadn't changed the locks yet, because part of me still believed some things weren't worth the hassle. She walked in like she owned the floor beneath her, like unannounced entrances were her right, not her imposition. I brought you something, she said brightly, as if presenting a gift rather than a maneuver. She placed a small manila envelope on the table between us like it was neutral, like it wasn't barbed. Inside, a set of keys, and a glossy, folded brochure. Bright Pines. Affordable comfort, close to everything. The cover showed a bland apartment complex rendered in perfect morning light. I scanned the brochure. 1 bedroom, ground floor, near a bus stop. Small bullet points that might appeal to someone who'd forgotten how to claim space. There's a church across the street, Vera added, and a little bodega. You'll love the quiet. She sat across from me, hands folded like she was at a performance review. She leaned forward with a conspiratorial smile. It's only temporary. Think of it as a reset. You said once that the house felt too big, remember? I didn't remember saying that. Not aloud, at least. She kept going, gentle as a velvet rope tightening. It's not like you have anyone else living with you. That place is more house than one woman needs. There it was, her real voice, soft words, sharpened edges, a nudge disguised as concern, a forced downsizing disguised as love. I nodded slowly, said nothing, flipped the brochure shut and slid it back across the table. Her smile didn't falter. Either she mistook my silence for agreement or she hoped I would. That was always Vera's trick. Say something outrageous, watch the room freeze, and then carry on as if everyone agreed. If no one challenged her, it became truth. That's how she rewrote stories. That's how she rewrote me. After she left, I placed the keys in the drawer with the rubber bands, loose screws, and expired coupons. They clinked softly, like a lie wrapped in metal. I didn't touch them again. That night, I was looking for a casserole recipe my mother used to make. Something with crushed crackers, canned soup, and an unreasonable amount of cheese. I remembered pinning it to her Pinterest years ago. Her tablet was on the kitchen island, charging. Still unlocked, I meant to be quick, but the screen blinked on and opened the last used app. Her email. She hadn't logged out. My finger hovered over the notification bar. Elowen's name glared back in bold. I tapped. The email opened, and the first line made my stomach knot. Once she signs the transition letter, it's legally ours. My heart began to pound, not fast but heavy, like every beat was dragging something behind it. I kept reading. She's always been passive. She won't fight. We'll move the nursery in first, make it feel like home before it's even official. And then, Elowen's reply. Don't worry, she'll fold. She always folds. I didn't read the rest. I didn't need to. The betrayal was complete, efficient, signed, sealed, and ready for delivery. I took 3 screenshots, emailed them to myself, then I logged out of the app, cleared the history, closed the tablet like I hadn't just found a scalpel hidden beneath the couch cushions. I stood in the center of the living room, stared at the floorboards I'd installed myself. I remembered the nights I'd stayed up sanding until my fingers blistered, headphones in, podcast humming to keep the grief at bay after Barrett died. They thought I'd just hand it over. They thought they could erase me again. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed, Free Legal Aid, Portland, Oregon. The first result? A firm specializing in property disputes for low-income women. Free consultations, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I booked the earliest appointment. Thursday at 3:45 p.m. I closed the browser, exhaled. Not relief, more like a release, a quiet unspooling. In the hallway, I reached for the fireproof box again. Opened it. Inside, the original deed, waiting patiently. My name there, steady and unchallenged. A lighthouse in stormy water. I printed the fake lease and laid it beside the real deed on the kitchen counter. They looked like truth and fiction set side by side. I lit a candle, not a scented one, just one of those stubby emergency candles that smelled faintly like wax and cardboard. It flickered like it knew something real was happening. You've underestimated me for the last time, I whispered. Not to them, to myself. It wasn't until after midnight that I sat back down at the dining table. The house was quiet in a way that didn't comfort me anymore. It felt like it was waiting. I opened my laptop, clicked New Document. The cursor blinked at the top of the blank page. I titled it, What They Think I Won't Do. And then I began to type. The first sound that caught my attention was a hollow thud. Steady, rhythmic. I was standing in the kitchen rinsing out a coffee mug when the noise filtered in through the quiet. I paused, listening. A soft metallic clink followed, like the tip of a paint can lid settling against tile. I set the mug down. I hadn't approved any work. As I stepped out of the kitchen and down the hall toward the guest room, the scent hit me first, artificial lavender and wet primer. Then I heard Elowen laugh, not loud but clearly comfortable, like someone rearranging what belonged to them. I reached the doorway and stopped. The room had been emptied. Gone were the soft green curtains I'd hemmed myself, the old rug from my college years, rolled and leaning against the hallway wall, the bookshelf I'd thrifted and refinished with my own hands, moved. The shelf in the corner, the one that held my father's photo in its wooden frame next to the cedar box of handwritten notes he'd left before passing, wasn't just moved, it was missing entirely. A stranger stood with a paint roller in hand, covering the pale gray walls with something pastel and lifeless. Pale peach or cream? I couldn't tell. It was the color of hospitals or Instagram nurseries. Elowen turned and smiled, her eyes lighting up like this was a grand reveal. "Oh, you're just in time to see the transformation," she said, rubbing her belly. "We thought this would be the perfect room. Lots of light, quiet. It's got the best energy in the house." I glanced around slowly, my eyes scanning the corners where memories used to live. "Where's the shelf?" I asked. My voice didn't rise, but it didn't hide the weight behind the question either. She waved her hand casually, not even pausing her slow steps across the room. "We had to get rid of it. Too much emotional clutter. Babies are sensitive to that sort of thing. Energy matters." My body stiffened, but I kept my tone even. "What did you do with the contents?" "What contents?" she asked, like she genuinely didn't understand. "The photo, the letters." She frowned, then tilted her head. "Oh, those old things? I think Mom tossed them. Or maybe they're in the garage. I don't know. Honestly, you probably don't need that stuff anymore. It's been, what, 10 years?" She didn't wait for me to respond. She turned back to the designer, who had started measuring the opposite wall. I didn't say a word. I walked out, slowly, and down the stairs to the garage. It took me 10 minutes of digging through bins and trash bags to find them. My father's letters, folded and yellowing, tossed carelessly between an old mop and a box of expired baby bottles. The photo frame had cracked. The glass had splintered into 3 sharp lines across his face. I sat on the garage steps with the cedar box in my lap and stared at the photo. No tears came. I waited for them, expected them even, but nothing. Only a hollow ache, the kind of ache that's too familiar to surprise you anymore. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, I stood in the backyard. I held the frame under the porch light, brushing away dirt from the corner. From the kitchen window, I could see the fresh coat of paint glistening in the guest room, what used to be mine, now scrubbed clean for Elowen's new beginning. They thought they were building a nursery, but all I saw was a grave for my father's memory. For the days I spent in that room rebuilding myself after I lost my own child, an early miscarriage, years ago, when I thought I'd still have the chance to carry something forward. I never told Elowen or Mom, not out of shame, just, I knew they wouldn't understand the kind of grief that settles in silence. I spent weeks sanding those walls after that loss, nights laying tile when I couldn't sleep. That room wasn't just a guest room. It was where I decided I'd keep living. I picked up the cracked photo and the letters and went inside. I wiped them off and set them on my desk. Then I pulled out my laptop, logged onto a retail site, and ordered a document scanner. A good one. High resolution, fast feed. If they were going to erase me, I'd at least leave behind a record. Over the next few days, I scanned every receipt, every utility bill, every contractor invoice. If my name touched it, I saved it. I sorted them into folders, labeled and color-coded like a paralegal prepping for court. I didn't confront them. I didn't mention the shelf again. I didn't argue when Vera talked about Elowen's nesting phase or when she bragged about how warm the space feels now. I simply documented, quietly, deliberately. And each night, I added one more note to my private file titled, "They Think I Won't." Still, it hurt more than I let on. Each time I passed that room, I could still see the green curtains in my memory. I could hear my dad's voice reading his letters to me in the back of my mind. I could remember the feel of the sanding block against the wall, my tears mixing with sawdust and sweat. I didn't cry anymore. I remembered. The night after the designer came to hang the new curtains, the ones Elowen ordered with a print of foxes and stars, I walked into my bathroom and looked in the mirror. Not just glanced, looked. My face was harder now, not mean, but resolved. My hair was pulled back tightly, a few gray strands at the temples not yet surrendered to die. I didn't smile. I took a post-it from the drawer beside the sink. On it, I wrote, "Remember everything." I pressed it onto the mirror, just beside my reflection. I didn't need to rage. I didn't need to break anything, but I needed to remember, because I knew they were going to keep forgetting. I didn't go downstairs right away. From my bedroom window, I could already see the balloons, pink and cream, tied in pairs, bobbing lightly in the backyard breeze. A table had been unfolded near the fence, covered in a thin plastic tablecloth printed with cartoon bunnies. Folding chairs were arranged in a semicircle beneath a pop-up canopy someone had dragged from the garage without asking. Then came the rustling, the clatter of glass, and laughter, light, cheerful, rehearsed. I tightened the tie on my robe and moved toward the staircase. Halfway down, I heard Vera's voice greet someone at the door. "Welcome! Come in, come in. Yes, this is Elowin's new place. Isn't it just perfect for a young family? The words hit me like a dull thud to the back of the skull. Not the lie itself, I'd heard worse, but the confidence in it. As though I'd vacated without a word, as though I'd never existed here. By the time I reached the bottom step, more guests had arrived. Cars lined the street, some parked so close to my mailbox I doubted the mailman could deliver anything today. A woman I didn't recognize stepped inside holding a pastel gift bag. I didn't stop her. No one did. I walked into my kitchen and froze. The center island, usually clear, had been turned into a buffet. Store-bought cupcakes, fruit skewers, a punch bowl with floating raspberries. But it wasn't just the food. The decor had changed too. My tea mugs were missing, replaced by paper cups with cartoon elephants. The magnet collection on my fridge, pieces from road trips I'd taken alone, cities I loved, had been taken down. In their place, baby-themed stickers, Mommy to be, guess the due date, welcome little one. And my bookshelf? It now held diapers. Not books, diapers. Elowin appeared from the hallway, dressed in a soft ivory dress, cradling her belly like a delicate vase. Her face lit up when she saw me, not with warmth, but like I was a painting she had to walk around. "Oh, I'm so glad you're here," she said. "We weren't sure if you were going to join, but it's nice, right? We thought it'd be sweet to celebrate here. It feels right." I blinked. "Did you?" She cut me off. "Don't worry. We'll clean up after. Mom handled most of it, honestly. She wanted to surprise me." Surprise. That word. As though this were a gift. As though this desecration of space and memory had been carefully wrapped and tied with a ribbon. She walked away before I could respond, already pulling someone into a selfie in front of a banner that read, "Home Sweet Family." I stood by the fridge for a moment, not moving. A few people glanced at me, then away. One woman whispered, "Is that her sister?" Another responded, "I thought she said they bought this place." They, not me. I slipped out the back door. The sun was bright, too bright, like it wanted to expose every lie unfolding inside my walls. I found shade behind the shed, sat on the overturned planter box, and watched the party continue. The balloons danced like they were mocking me. I stayed out there for nearly 30 minutes, long enough to hear Vera laugh her signature laugh, sharp, performative, meant to signal to guests that everything was perfect. Eventually, I went back inside, not because I wanted to, but because the numbness had shifted into something sharper. Not rage, not yet, but something awake. I climbed the stairs quietly and walked straight to the bathroom. I closed the door, turned on the sink, and let the water run until the mirror fogged. Then I wiped a clean circle with my palm and looked at myself. No tears, no shock, just recognition. "They want me invisible," I whispered. And I realized then, it wasn't enough for them to take the house. They wanted to rewrite the story too. Make me the distant aunt who used to live here, the one who faded out of the picture. Quiet, convenient, not anymore. I walked into my office and opened the drawer where I kept my paperwork. I'd already started compiling receipts, but now I added a new column in my ledger. Events hosted without consent. Under it, I wrote the date. Description: baby shower. Estimated damages. Emotional plus property displacement TBD. I took out my phone and photographed the fridge. The banner, the cupcakes. I recorded a slow video walkthrough of each room, narrating quietly, listing every object that had been moved, removed, or replaced. By the time I was done, the guests were clapping downstairs. Someone had given a toast. I didn't care what they said. Downstairs, Vera laughed again, loud, sharp, grating, the kind of laugh that tries too hard. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching her from behind the railing. Elowin stood beside her, hand on her belly, nodding and smiling as if she owned the world. "Celebrate," I whispered. "I'm collecting." By the time I came down for coffee the next morning, the party balloons had already wilted, sagging against the fence like they knew the celebration had no business being here. The backyard was littered with half-deflated decor, plastic cutlery, and a paper plate with frosting smeared into the grain of my deck railing. I didn't bother cleaning it up, not yet. On the dining table, next to my placemat and the latest grocery flyer, sat a thick manila folder. It hadn't been there the night before. I knew that because I'd cleared the table myself before bed, the way I always did. I didn't touch it at first. I made my coffee, stirred in a splash of oat milk, took 2 sips, then with my left hand so I could keep my right free in case I needed to throw something. I opened it. Inside was a lease transfer form, already filled out, my name printed at the top, next to previous tenant. Elowyn Hadley Bell listed as incoming primary resident. The date, July 1st. Terms, 0 rent, transfer of responsibility and use of premises for maternal health accommodations. A sticky note was attached to the front, written in my mother's handwriting. Just sign when you're ready, sweetie. Elowyn needs peace before the baby comes. Peace. That word again. The same one she'd used when she tried to get me to move out after Dad's funeral. The same word she'd used when she insisted I let Elowyn borrow my car for a few weeks, 5 years ago. Right before it got sold, and I never saw it again. I didn't tear the paper, didn't crumple it, didn't scream. I slipped it into a new folder I labeled fiction and slid it into the second drawer of my file cabinet, right next to the real deed, the one with my name embossed in black ink. That night, we had dinner at home. Elowyn sitting at my table like it was hers, rubbing her belly and smiling as she scrolled through baby name forums on her phone. Vera passed her the butter dish and launched into a monologue about baby showers in the 80s. I stayed mostly silent, poking at my steamed carrots, waiting, and then it came, right on schedule. You know, Vera said, placing her fork down gently like she was preparing for a deposition. I just worry about Elowyn. Her doctor said her blood pressure's been higher lately. Elowyn made a quiet, pitiful noise, the kind that says, "See what I'm going through?" without using actual words. Vera looked at me. And stress isn't good for the baby. There it was, the guilt grenade. I leaned back slightly, placing my napkin on the table. This house, I said evenly, lowered my blood pressure, until you both moved in. The room stilled. Elowyn's fork paused mid-air. Vera blinked. That's not fair, Elowyn whispered. No, I said. It's not. But neither is being gaslit in your own home. Vera's mouth opened, probably to toss another moralistic bomb wrapped in sweet talk, but I stood before she could launch it. I cleared my plate, walked into the kitchen, and rinsed it. Then I turned to them and said, "Dinner's done. So am I." I didn't slam anything, didn't storm off. I walked upstairs and shut my bedroom door like a woman who had just decided something permanent. Afterward, I sat at my desk and printed a sign in bold black letters. Owner, Sorella Hadley, do not remove without permission. I taped it to my bedroom door. Next, I pulled out my phone and walked the house, snapping time-stamped photos of every room. The new furniture, the decorations, the rearranged shelves. I recorded a video, quietly narrated, detailing what was mine, what had been altered, and what they'd brought in without permission. I submitted a preliminary inquiry to the tenant court's website before bed. Just a question about uninvited occupants. No names, not yet, but enough. The next morning, the tone in the house shifted. Elowyn didn't say good morning. Her tone, when she asked about the toaster, was clipped, formal, like a coworker you don't like, but still need to get information from. Vera didn't ask if I wanted coffee. She made 2 cups and walked out to the porch without looking at me. I sat at the kitchen island, coffee in one hand, my leather-bound notebook in the other. I logged each movement they made that morning. Time, 7:32 a.m. Event, Elowyn entered bathroom, closed door, stayed for 13 minutes, music playing from her phone. Time, 7:51 a.m. Event, Vera opened mail, shoved something into purse before I could see it. No eye contact. They were shifting, tensing up. Their posture wasn't casual anymore. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. They were watching me now, too. Good. I'd already shifted. I'd already chosen to stop playing the role they wrote for me. Let them squirm. I'd pushed back. They chose war. I was sitting in the waiting room of a small legal clinic off Alberta Street, scrolling through my phone while sipping from a vending machine coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. The walls around me were painted a color that couldn't decide between beige and yellow, and the air conditioning rattled like it was working overtime but getting nowhere. Across from me, a couple argued softly in Spanish. To my right, a volunteer attorney called out someone's name. I scrolled mindlessly. Email, weather, Instagram, and then I saw it. A photo of my porch. Elowyn, standing in front of my front door, belly full and hands folded gently beneath it. The angle soft and warm, edited with a pink-tinted filter. The caption read, "So grateful for our new home as we prepare to welcome baby Ezra. All made possible thanks to Mom. Couldn't do this without her love and support." Dozens of likes. Heart emojis. Beautiful! So happy for you guys! That porch looks dreamy. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Not one mention of me, not my name, not a tag, not even a vague thank you to the person who'd spent the past 8 years making that porch what it was, refinishing the wood, repainting the railing, planting the jasmine that climbed the trellis behind her in that photo. And the worst part? She wasn't lying to them, not directly, but the absence of my name was intentional. It was erasure, made public. I didn't comment, I didn't like it, I didn't screenshot it. I just closed the app and placed the phone face down on the seat next to me. I left the clinic with a packet of information in my bag and a follow-up appointment for the next week. I walked home instead of taking the bus, needing the air to cool something in me I wasn't ready to name. By the time I stepped through the front door, I saw another package on the entryway bench. I knew what it was. The photo album. I had spent weeks assembling it. Handwritten notes, photos of Dad holding Elowyn as a baby, a tiny baby blanket I'd knit with the same pattern Grandma had once used on mine. It was supposed to be my gift to Elowyn. A real one, not for show, something personal, not performative, but the label had been torn open, and Vera, of course, had beat me to it. Later that evening, while I was reheating leftover rice in the microwave, I heard Elowyn's delighted voice from the living room. "Oh wow, Mom, this is beautiful." I turned the corner just in time to see her holding the album. "It's perfect. You even found that picture of me with Dad at the lake." Vera beamed. "I knew you'd love it." No one looked at me. Not a glance. I stood there, wooden spoon in hand, watching them flip through my work like it had always been theirs. No correction, no hesitation. That night, I didn't go to bed angry. I went to bed methodical. I got up early the next morning, before anyone else had stirred, and started removing my belongings from the shared spaces. My books from the shelf, the antique vase from the mantel, the framed poetry print from the hallway. I carried each item into my room, slowly, silently, like retrieving artifacts from a house being slowly taken over by strangers. Then, I taped a printed statement to the refrigerator door. "You are occupying this home rent-free. Legal notice pending." I placed one on the inside of the front door, another above the dishwasher, a fourth taped to the inside of the laundry room cabinet. They saw them, I know they did, but no one said anything. After breakfast, I pulled receipts from the manila folders in my filing cabinet, plumbing invoices, roof repair bills, kitchen renovation contracts. I took photos of each one, scanned them into my laptop, and saved them in a new folder labeled "Claiming What's Mine." I found the email address of the legal aid attorney I'd met and attached the documents with a short note. "See attached. Let me know next steps." No flourishes, no explanations, just facts. That evening, I printed a black and white sign in bold font and taped it inside the front window, visible from the street. "This home is owned solely by Sorella Hadley. Any claim otherwise is fraudulent." I stood on the sidewalk across the street and stared at it for a long while. Cars passed behind me. A teenager skateboarded by, earbuds in, oblivious. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a dog barked. Inside the house, no one moved the sign. I didn't expect them to. I expected silence. And that's what I got. Back inside, I pulled the curtains shut. Every last one. I didn't want them peeking through. Not now. I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees and opened the folder titled Legal, newly renamed from Just in Case. And I began building my case, quietly, precisely, without an ounce of apology. They thought I'd crumble, but they had no idea how steady a woman can stand when the ground beneath her was poured by her own hands. By the time I stepped outside that morning, The sun had just climbed above the rooftops, casting long, clean shadows across the street. I walked barefoot to the curb, pulling my robe tighter as I reached into the mailbox. It wasn't until I sorted through the stack of envelopes that my hands stopped moving. Half of it wasn't mine. Medical statements addressed to Elowyn Hadley Bell, flyers for baby gear, prenatal vitamin samples, a folded catalog with a coupon clipped to the front that read, "Your baby deserves the best start. Right at home." Home. I hadn't changed the address. They had, not just hers, mine too. Elowyn's name was listed directly under mine on the mailbox now, typed neatly on a label Vera must have printed in the kitchen. I stood there for longer than I care to admit, the mail limp in my hand, not from the weight of the paper, but from the realization that they weren't just squatting. They were installing themselves like permanent fixtures, like termites that smiled sweetly as they chewed through the foundation. I walked slowly back inside. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence you only notice when it's covering something ugly. I made it halfway up the stairs when I realized I hadn't seen my slippers. I checked the bedroom. My bedroom was empty. Not completely. The bed was still there, made perfectly tight, as if untouched. But my books were gone. My sweaters, the jewelry box from Aunt Sharon, the framed photo of me and Dad at the beach. Missing. Panic didn't hit me immediately. It was more like a rising sense of absurdity, like walking into a hotel room and realizing someone else had unpacked their things there already. I turned and walked down the hallway. Past the bathroom, down to the garage. There, stacked against the far wall in labeled boxes, were my belongings. Spare. That's what the boxes said. In thick black Sharpie, written in Vera's handwriting. I opened one. Sweaters, folded neatly, like they were prepping them for donation. I heard footsteps behind me. "Morning," Vera said, not even looking up from her coffee mug. "I just thought we'd get ahead of things. You don't really use the space much anymore." My voice stayed calm. "That's my room." "It's a house, Sorella," she said, as if I were the one being ridiculous. "Rooms shift. Priorities shift." Before I could reply, Elowyn entered, yawning and barefoot, brushing crumbs from her sweatshirt. "It's only fair we make space for the baby," she said softly, as if the tone would make it sound less violent. I stared at them both. "I didn't give you permission," Vera shrugged. "You didn't say no either, and you've always been quiet." I didn't answer, not because I agreed, but because I knew anything I said in that moment would be wasted. I closed the box, walked past them, took a shower, got dressed, and left the house. A walk to nowhere, through the neighborhood, past kids on bikes, dogs tugging leashes, sprinkler systems ticking rhythmically in front yards. I passed a house for sale 3 blocks down. A sold sign had just been zip-tied to the post. When I returned home, I wasn't even inside before the doorbell rang. It was 2:58 p.m. I opened the door to find a woman standing on my porch, heels, blazer, clipboard. Real estate agent, maybe early 30s, too polished for this neighborhood. "Hi," she said. "I'm here for the 3:00 showing. Ms. Elowyn scheduled it." I stared at her. "You're standing on property you have no right to sell," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me? Elowyn doesn't own this house. Neither does Vera. There is no showing." She stepped back, clearly uncomfortable, realizing something was very wrong. I'm sorry, I was just told to." I held up a hand. "You didn't know. But now you do. This property is mine, fully, legally. You can leave now." She nodded quickly, muttered something about miscommunication, and nearly tripped getting back to her car. Inside, Vera and Elowyn stood in the kitchen whispering. They didn't look surprised when I walked in. "She'll cave," Elowyn murmured. Vera sipped her tea. "She always caves." That sentence stuck to the walls. I stood there for a full minute, watching them, watching the space they'd overtaken like it was rightfully theirs. I thought about the fake lease, the boxes, the mail, the baby shower, the Instagram post. I thought about the housewarming card Vera gave Elowyn just 2 nights ago, signed, "To Our Future." And I finally moved. I went upstairs. Picked up my phone, scrolled to Clara's number. My hands shook as I typed, but my voice, when it came, was clear. "It's happening," I said. "I'm filing the eviction. Today." There was a pause on the line. Then Clara's voice, firm, warm, without hesitation. It's about time. I exhaled, walked to my laptop, opened the folder titled Legal. By sunset, the papers were signed, and they had no idea what was coming. I left the lawyer's office with a folder tucked under one arm and a quiet, deliberate rhythm in my steps. The sun was low, slanting sideways across the pavement, and I could feel the beginning of Portland's late July heat climbing into the soles of my shoes. The USB drive in my purse held every piece of evidence, every receipt, every message, and every small act of disrespect that built this storm. The building was modest, just 2 stories above a dental clinic, but inside, the attorney's expression had shifted from skepticism to certainty the moment I placed the fireproof envelope in front of him. He flipped slowly through the stack. The original deed, notarized and dated, my name crisp at the top. Then came the itemized expenses, utilities, roof repair, landscaping, insulation, permits, line after line of cost, labor, and ownership. I watched his eyes flick over the photos I'd taken of the altered rooms, of Elowin's decorations covering my fireplace, of Vera's handwriting labeling my belongings as spare. Then he landed on the social media screenshots, Elowin's post claiming the house, thanking Vera as though I didn't exist, her baby registry using my home's address, the email chain I'd printed that discussed the fake lease, the plan to push me out gently, and the words that still echoed louder than I ever expected. She always folds. The attorney didn't say much, just glanced up, nodded, and said, "You did everything right. Now let's serve them." That night, I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to. I stayed up organizing digital folders, backing everything to cloud storage, triple-checking dates and annotations. The silence of the house felt different now, not suffocating, not tense, just still, like the eye of a storm before the final pass. At 6:13 p.m. the next day, 2 sheriff's deputies knocked on my front door. I'd timed it so they'd arrive during dinner. Elowin answered, barefoot and smiling. She was wearing a loose dress I didn't recognize, her hair braided down the side like she'd come from a lifestyle shoot. Her smile faltered when she saw the badges. One of the deputies held out an envelope, his voice calm but clear. "You are being served an eviction notice. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. If you wish to dispute the claim, you may file a response within 10 business days." She blinked at him, then looked at the envelope like it was written in another language. Vera appeared in the hallway, fork still in her hand. Her face went pale, the kind of pale that comes from realization, not illness. "I'm sorry. What is this?" she asked. I stepped around the deputies, quiet and steady. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I walked upstairs without a word, closed my door, and sat by the window with a mug of tea. Below, I could hear muffled voices rising and falling. Panic, denial, confusion. But no apology. 3 weeks later, we were in court. They tried to argue it down, of course. Elowin showed up in a flowing maternity blouse, her voice full of practiced warmth. "This was all a misunderstanding," she told the judge. "My mother offered me a place to stay, and Sorella never objected. We'd discussed it over dinner." There was a verbal agreement. The judge, a woman in her 60s with tight silver curls and an expression like stone, barely looked up from the file in front of her. "You are not on the deed. You have not paid rent. You have not contributed to utilities. And according to the record before me, you and your mother attempted to execute an unapproved lease using the owner's full legal name without consent." Elowin tried again, softer this time. "She's my sister. I just wanted a safe place to raise my baby." The judge leaned forward. "This isn't about intentions, Ms. Hadley Bell. It's about ownership, evidence, and the law. And right now, the law is not on your side." The verdict came quickly. Eviction upheld. 30 days to vacate, no extensions. $13,700 in damages awarded to me for unauthorized use of space, utilities, and emotional distress. No right to appeal. Vera didn't speak a single word during the entire hearing. She sat next to Elowin like she'd swallowed something bitter and didn't know how to spit it out. When the judge adjourned, I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I gathered my papers and walked past them in silence. Outside, Clara waited for me on the courthouse steps. "How'd it go?" she asked, even though she already knew. I handed her the stamped court order. She glanced at it, then nodded. "They didn't see it coming, did they?" I shook my head. "They never do." That night, I sat on the porch with a fresh cup of coffee. The house behind me was still. Empty, for the first time in months. Not silent because I'd been pushed into a corner. Silent because I'd reclaimed every inch. For the first time in a long while, the quiet wasn't a punishment. It was mine, and it felt earned. But silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of something I never expected. The house breathed differently now. It was still, sure, but no longer tight with tension. The kind of silence I'd once resented had softened into something else entirely, something earned. It wasn't empty. It was open. It had been a little over 5 weeks since the court ruling. Elowyn and Vera left with more noise than I expected. The day they packed, I stayed upstairs. Boxes thumped down the stairs. Vera barked instructions. Elowyn cried on the phone, maybe to Dorian, maybe to someone else trying to rescue the version of her life she'd paraded online. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't wave goodbye. I waited until their car turned off my street, and then I finally exhaled. 3 days later, Clara showed up at my front door holding an old, faded photo between 2 fingers. "Guess what I found at the bottom of my closet?" she said, stepping inside before I could answer. I took the photo. It was us, early 20s, covered in paint, grinning with pride next to a mismatched bookshelf we'd just finished staining. Behind us, my backyard. Unrecognizable now, but still somehow familiar. She looked around the living room, touched the trim near the window. "This place still feels like you," she said. I hadn't heard that in years. Not since before the house became a battleground. Not since before my name was reduced to an afterthought on someone else's lease agreement. We made tea, sat on the porch, and talked for hours. About nothing. About everything. Clara was the first person in months to call me by name without asking for anything. The following week, a blog post made the rounds online, a local lifestyle column called Better Together. The article detailed how a well-known influencer couple had been evicted from their family home due to legal misrepresentation. Screenshots of court documents were embedded halfway down the page, along with links to the judge's statement and a short quote from the plaintiff. Me. I hadn't spoken to the journalist, but truth has a funny way of surfacing. Elowyn disappeared from social media almost overnight. Her brand sponsors dropped her within days. Dorian moved out, according to a neighbor who saw him carrying boxes to an Uber around midnight. Vera, from what I heard, went to stay with her cousin in Salem and hadn't been seen since. There was no confrontation, no final showdown, just a quiet retreat from the roles they'd written for themselves in my life. I didn't feel vindicated, not exactly, but I did feel lighter. One Tuesday morning in early September, I called a contact Clara had passed along, her cousin, who worked with a local women's shelter that offered transitional housing for clients leaving abusive or coercive family dynamics. I explained my idea to turn the guest room, not a nursery, not a battleground, into a quiet space for women like me, like I had been. "I don't have much," I told her, "but I have a safe house. And I'm not using that room for ghosts anymore." The woman, Teresa, paused on the other end of the line. Then she said, "That's more than enough." We set up a basic agreement, a 60-day stay limit, light screening through the shelter, weekly check-ins, no rent, just dignity. Her name was Rachel. She arrived on a Thursday with 2 children and 1 duffel bag. That was it. The kids were quiet, wide-eyed, gripping her legs like barnacles. Rachel looked exhausted, not just physically, but existentially, like someone who'd spent too long in a room where she had to whisper just to stay alive. I gave her the tour, showed her the guest room, soft lighting, clean linens, a bookshelf with paperbacks and coloring books. I told her where to find the towels, the extra toothbrushes, the emergency snacks. Then I handed her the key. She looked at it for a long time before taking it. "No one's erasing you here," I said. She nodded, too tired to respond. The kids curled onto the bed together. Rachel closed the door softly behind her. That night, I watered the garden. The late summer tomatoes were thriving. The air smelled like dirt and basil and second chances. Every morning after that, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote in my journal again. Nothing poetic, just truths. What I noticed, what I felt, what I didn't want to forget. Dad's photo was back on the hallway shelf. The cedar box, too. I didn't dust it anymore. I let it be part of the room, lived in and imperfect. The bookshelf Clara and I had built was now in the guest room. Rachel placed a family photo on it the third day she was there. Some evenings, when the house was completely still, I'd sit on the porch and watch the windows glow from inside, not with intrusion, but with comfort. People used to say silence meant something was wrong, but I'd learned otherwise. Sometimes silence is the sound of survival. Sometimes it's the sound of beginning again. They tried to replace me. I chose to remain. Sometimes the quietest people carry the heaviest truths and the deepest strength. This wasn't just a story about eviction or betrayal. It was about reclaiming space, voice, and dignity. What would you do if your own family treated your life like a spare room? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.